YouTube, what is good? So today we're going to be breaking down this photo right here. I'm going to explain to you everything I did to make this photo possible. It's a little bit of Milky Way techniques, a little bit of light trail technique. Hopefully when this video is done, you'll be able to take everything that I taught you and create your own Milky Way light trail combination photo. So here's the backstory on this photo. Last week, myself, my buddy Aaron, and my buddy Chris, we all drove up to Smoky Mountain National Park with the specific goal to make some Milky Way photos. And after I made this shot, I posted it on Instagram and I asked you guys, do you want me to make a breakdown of how exactly I made this photo? And there was an overwhelming answer of yes. So that's what we're doing today. Now, me personally, I love Milky Way photography, but one challenge of Milky Way photos is it's a great backdrop, but you need an interesting foreground and interesting midground to really make a composition that stands out and highlights that Milky Way in an interesting way. And one great technique you can use is light trails to add that other layer of interest into your photo to really complement the Milky Way. The settings are about the same and it's usually pretty easy to find a location that works with this type of photo. And that leads us into the first thing we have to talk about, which is the location. And the location could be the most challenging aspect of a photograph like this. You need to find the perfect location where you can get the light trails you're going for and also have the Milky Way be visible. Using my photo as an example, this is a photo that I've had in mind for about 6 months. If you go way back on my Instagram, in February, I posted a photo from this exact location. It was a test shot for me to figure out if it would be possible to make this exact picture right here. Now what I did, I went to that location, I saw that the road curved nicely, and I knew this was going to be a nice light trail photo. But here's how I checked to see if the Milky Way would be visible. The first thing I did was open up an app that I use called Star Guide. Star Guide is a really interesting app because it shows the night sky, it shows where different stars are going to be, and it shows where the center of the Milky Way will be. So I opened up that app, I went to a random date in the summer, and I watched the Milky Way move across the sky to see what direction the Milky Way would be in. And sure enough, the Milky Way was south. I pretty much knew that was what it would be, but I wanted to make sure. So from there, I opened up my compass app on my iPhone and I stood at the exact spot I wanted to make a photo to see which direction south would be. Sure enough, south was the perfect direction for this particular photo. Standing in this exact location, I could see, all right, south is straight ahead of me. That's where the Milky Way would be, and that is where the road crosses. That's the toughest part of this particular photo. You have to figure out, will I be in a location where the Milky Way lines up with the particular road that I want to photograph? So you need to find the right road that leads you in the direction of the Milky Way. And depending on what part of the world you're in, what part of the United States you're in, the Milky Way will be in different locations at different time of the year. So it's really important to check out one of those apps, something like Star Guide. Those will help you get an idea of where the Milky Way will be located, and you can go to location during the day, check and see which direction the road is going, and get an idea of where the Milky Way would be in correlation to the particular road you want to photograph. So now on to the second thing that we have to talk about, which is the timing of this particular photo. So you got the perfect location, you found the road facing the right direction, facing right into the Milky Way, you know where everything's going to be lined up. Now you have to go to this location to make the photo at the right time of the year. And there's multiple factors that go into what time of year is right for the particular photo you're making. One is the moon. The moon is critical for any type of astrophotography. You need to choose a day where the moon is not visible or will not be rising, or it's not rising till later in the night when you've already made your photo. One way you can do this is just go online, Google moonrise, moon set times for the particular area you'll be shooting in. You can look at these charts and realize, okay, the moon is going to come up at 6:30. The shot that I want to make is at 1. We're good. I don't have to worry about the moon. The reason why we went last Thursday to make this photo is because there was no moon in the sky on this particular day. But if we had gone 2 days later or 2 days earlier, there would have been a small sliver of moon in the sky, thus affecting the visibility of the Milky Way. The second thing that you need to keep in mind is how much light pollution there is in the particular area you're photographing. We went to Smoky Mountain National Park because typically national parks are very dark. There's not a lot of light pollution because people don't live inside the national park, and the Milky Way was extremely visible. If you live in a highly populated area, you will most likely need to go outside of that area to get a Milky Way photograph. Now, one other factor with the timing of this photo is the time of year you're trying to make this exact image. Now, this can vary depending on what part of the world you live in, so my advice is download one of those apps, check out and figure out where the Milky Way is going to be most visible, or do some research on your particular area and figure out what months of the year are best for the Milky Way. But I know for the United States, June, July, August, September are typically considered the best best months for Milky Way photography. So we took the time, scouted, found the perfect location, the perfect road lining up with the Milky Way. We took the time to figure out when there's going to be no moon, if we're out of the light pollution. Now we are on to step number 3, which is our setup. and our settings. So there's a few things that you're going to need to know to get this photo. One, you're obviously going to need a tripod. That is critical to get a long exposure photo like this. The second thing that you're going to need is a cable release or a camera that has a self-timer. Almost all cameras have a self-timer, so you should be pretty good. The next thing that you will need is a wide angle lens that goes down to at least f2.8. 2.8 is kind of the minimum for Milky Way photography because it allows enough light to come into the camera quickly, and you can keep your exposure time in a nice range so you're not getting a lot of star movement. So the settings that you're going to need on your camera are going to be like this. This is kind of the Milky Way standard you want to start with. f2.8 on your lens. You're going to want to do a 15-second exposure, ISO 3200. That's pretty much the standard. Now, granted, you might have to adjust accordingly depending on what your situation is, but when you get out, you're shooting the Milky Way, I recommend starting with those settings and then moving them around. The reason you want to do 15 seconds, like I mentioned a second ago, 15 seconds is an optimum range to where you can get the stars nice and crisp, but get the maximum exposure time to let the most amount of light into your camera without getting star movement. So now your camera is set on a tripod, you got your settings set properly. Now we got to focus our camera. You're going to have to manually focus this shot. And here's what I recommend. Get your camera set to infinity, make a test photo, and then look on the back of your camera, zoom in on the screen, and see how sharp the stars look. If they look a little bit blurry, a little bit off, start adjusting that focus ring just slightly. Once again, depending on what kind of camera you're using, what kind of lens you're using, it can vary from person to person. So my recommendation, get it to infinity, take a test photo, and start adjusting slightly until you can look at the back of your camera, zoom in on the stars, and see that they are as crisp and as clean as you want them to look. So now the last step of our setup is going to be our self-timer or our cable release. So if you have a cable attached to your camera, this is ideal because you can go ahead and click the button, open up your shutter, start your shot. But if you don't have a cable release, one thing you can do is set your camera to a self-timer of 2 seconds. You can click the shutter. Once you take your finger off the shutter, that timer will count down and then it will make the photo. The reason you want to do this is because by using the self-timer or the cable release, you're not touching your camera and you're not going to create any motion that will affect the clarity and the sharpness of the Milky Way and of your stars and of your light trail. You want the cleanest photo possible, and one easy way to do that is by not moving your camera during a long exposure. So there we go. That's step number 3, your setup. Now we are into step number 4, which is the details. This is what's gonna make or break this particular photo. So let's go back to my example right here. I'm gonna break down a few details that you need to be aware of that are going to get you the best results possible. So if you look at my example photo right here, here's one critical piece of this image, one key that makes the photo better than any other shot that I made this particular night. The first is the type of car that is going through the frame. Now, we had so many cars go through the photo. They were just, your standard like sedan or SUV. But this photo is the one time that we had a large utility truck come through the photo. If you notice, we have 2 sets of brake lights and then we have this top light up here. Because this car was like a utility truck and it had lights all over it, we got a much more interesting light trail. These are the type of details that you need to pay attention to when you're out shooting this type of photo, because yeah, any car is a good car, you're gonna get light trails, but if you can catch that one special vehicle that comes through with a bunch of lights on the particular car, you're going to get a much more interesting light trail like this one. Now, the second thing that you need to pay attention to is the timing of the cars moving through your shot. And this can be a little tedious and a little annoying, but it pays off if you're patient. You need to wait for a moment where a single car is moving away from the camera. So you're just photographing the brake lights of that particular vehicle. There were a few moments where we were out shooting this photo where a car would come around the bend towards us and it would immediately ruin the photo because headlights are much brighter than brake lights. So if that headlight shines directly into your camera, it's going to affect your shot. You need to wait for the perfect moment where a car is traveling away from you to get the cleanest light trails possible. Brake lights are better than headlights in this particular type of photo, in my opinion. So those are the main things you need to pay attention to. Look for an interesting vehicle moving through the scene and make sure you're waiting for a moment where you're just having a car moving away from the camera and you're getting those brake lights. Now, the last thing you can pay attention to in details is the composition of your photo, the composition that you choose. A road, light trails, they can create lead lines that lead your eye. In my photo, my example, you notice the road is leading your eye into the Milky Way. This same effect can be achieved just shooting straight down a road with cars going past you and then the Milky Way being up top, or you could have a road curving to the left into the Milky Way. It really helps with this type of photo if you can find a road and light trails that lead your eye into the Milky Way to create a more balanced easy to read image for your eye. But yeah, that's pretty much it for today's breakdown of this photo. That was all the steps that I took to make this image possible. This is the first time I've really done a photo breakdown video like this, so if you enjoyed it, let me know in the comments. Hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button for more. Thank you guys so much for the support on this image. I was like blown away with how many people commented saying they wanted to see this video. So that's the steps that I took to make this image possible. Get out there, try it for yourself. The key to this photo, I'm telling you, is just find a location that's dark enough. I think that's the most important part. The composition, it's pretty easy with the road. You know, the light trails is pretty easy to wait for one car. The settings are really easy. It's just difficult to find a location that's dark enough to see the Milky Way. So get out there, find a dark sky, find a nice road, make yourself a photo like this one, combine the Milky Way, some light trails together, and we're doing it all in one shot. We're not making compositions like other people do. That's no fun. It's a lot more fun. We can just get it all in one photo. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'll catch you next time.